To me, I think the big four of thrash metal could be debated a lot, and people do debate it a lot, but most of the time, I kind of think it's a silly distinction. I understand that the whole origin of the big four of thrash metal, or any other genre for that matter, are the ones that are hailed as popularizing a specific genre, bringing it into the forefront, and so they are like the forebearers. But I think a lot of that is just stupid and not really looking at the actual bands that made thrash metal and made speed metal as big as it was, or other contemporary bands that were at points more talented or bigger than some of the big four were at various points that they were given this distinction. I adore the big four of thrash metal. I've said that I think Anthrax is perfectly rated. I've seen Slayer on their farewell tour, just got over seeing Megadeth. Metallica are one of my favorite bands, so none of this is coming from a place of like me not liking these bands in question. When thrash metal first started, it didn't really have its stride. It wasn't as big as it was going to get in the mid to late 80s, and there were plenty of other bands in the contemporary scene in the 80s that helped kickstart the thrash metal and speed metal that those bands took from. And even if you don't want to talk about projects like Venom or some of like the early extreme metal bands that influenced it, go back just a couple of years and you got Motorhead, who pretty much made the entirety of speed metal and thrash metal, or the early heavy metal bands, but Motorhead was pretty much the biggest influence, and I think that they would be just as rightfully put in that category as any of the big four of thrash metal. And that's not even talking about other bands that came before some of the big four of thrash metal. I'm talking Overkill, if I remember right, they formed in 1980, or Exodus, Testament, any of the bands from Germany that kicked ass, Sodom, Creator, Destruction, Tankard. Where are these bands, and why couldn't we expand it a little bit? And it's also the fact that a lot of the thrash metal bands changed throughout the years. Metallica hasn't made thrash metal music for a very long time. Is it just their legacy alone that makes them stake their claim and stay their part? Because I perfectly understand that in terms of influence and bringing metal to a large audience, there are very few bands that did it like Metallica did. And while Megadeth and Slayer and Anthrax have kind of stuck to their roots a little bit, I think that there are a ton of bands from the early 80s, like I said, some of which predate the big four, that have been kicking ass and making a ton of material, being very prolific throughout the decades, and haven't lost their stride whatsoever. And not even speaking in the underground, while you could say that a band like Metallica took it to another level and Megadeth took it to another level, there was a period of time where Slayer wasn't really as household of a name as it is now, and Anthrax especially wasn't as big of a household name as they are now. And I think that bands like Testament and Overkill and Exodus and Creator and Sodom were just as, if not more popular than bands like Anthrax were at the time, especially looking back as people have sort of rated all of their material in a pile. I personally just think the big four of thrash metal is kind of weird, because if we're defining it by the bands that were able to be the landmark bands and the ones that revolutionized the genre, it kind of falls flat on any single argument that you can make. If we're talking the bands that made thrash metal, the big four of thrash metal didn't really make thrash metal. Slayer was probably the most influential to a lot of extreme metal genres, but none of the big four of thrash metal were the ones that kickstarted speed metal, which would later become thrash metal. And if it's about who popularized thrash metal, yeah, you could say that Metallica and Megadeth and later Slayer would do that, but I feel like there are bands that could outplay Anthrax in terms of popularity at the time, both contemporarily and as the decades have worn on, so that doesn't really make sense. We love to categorize stuff, we love to put things in little boxes, but I've always thought it's kind of funny how we have the big four of thrash metal, and I understand that the German thrash metal scene has its big four as well, which I think is funny and awesome and great, but I just wanted to put this topic out there, hear your guys' opinions on it and your thoughts of the big four of thrash metal. You can let me know down in the comment section below your opinions of this topic. I can't wait to hear your opinion. Be sure to like this video if you enjoyed it, subscribe to join the review family today, and smash that notification bell to be notified of my future uploads. You know who it is, my name is Jay Morris, and I'm signing off saying farewell.